Welcome everyone. We might get going. I'm sure we'll have a few ladies join in, but that's okay. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Banyule and Nillumbik Youth Services Network Forum. My name is Jess Sayers and I'm here today representing the network. So we're very happy to bring you this session on school refusal. This year has definitely tested us, and with our education system jumping from on-site to home learning and back again, it's no surprise that this has been a really popular session today. I would like to start by paying my respects to the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, who are the traditional custodians of the land of which I think many of us are currently sitting on today. But I'd also like to extend those thoughts to the land on which you may be sitting on that might be different, given that we're in this online world. I'd like to acknowledge any elders, past, present and emerging, and give a special welcome to anyone that we might have in the audience today. For those who aren't aware, the Banyule and Nillumbik Youth Services Network is made up of over 15 youth agencies across the 2 municipalities. We come together to provide advocacy and opportunity to both young people and those who work with them. We provide many of these forums during the year on different topics that you feel are important. We always love to get your thoughts on what you want to hear, so please make sure that you share your ideas at the end of the session in the evaluation survey that I'll pop in the chat. You would have noticed that we've turned off your microphone and your camera today, and we ask that you please keep it that way. Your camera on will be fine, but we would ask that you keep your microphones off. We're recording this session, so for those that can't be with us today, and also for yourselves if you wanted to share later or also rewatch parts that you might have missed, I'll be sending you that link tomorrow. Today we are very lucky to have Dr. Lisa McKay-Brown from Melbourne University, who has worked in the education sector for over 25 years and has a particular interest in mental health, disability, school refusal, and if I'm being honest, a lot more that I probably don't have time to mention today. She is also joined by Sonia Van Buren from the Travancore School. Sonia's a teacher there and she has extensive experience working with families in this space and also runs a specific program that she'll explain a bit later about. Together, Lisa and Sonia will talk us through what is school refusal, why it can occur, and most importantly, some strategies on how to tackle it. At the end, we're also going to introduce Jess Spry from the Navigator program to talk us through how they provide support to young people and their families who have disengaged and what the requirements and access to that program entail. Now, I know we've turned off your microphone, but that doesn't mean we want to stop the conversation. We strongly encourage questions and ask that you use the chat functions, and there'll be time throughout this presentation that we prompt you to do so as well. This can happen through the session, as I just said, or at the end, we're actually going to have some allocated question time too. And lastly, before I bring the speakers on, I would like to ask that you keep an eye out for the evaluation survey that I mentioned earlier. I promise it is super short, but just for us, it makes a real difference for us to keep putting on these sessions for you guys and giving you what you want to hear about. So, you know, as much detail as you like, and please be honest, we don't want to provide things that aren't valuable for you guys. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Lisa and Sonia. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Sorry, just getting the good old PowerPoint sorted for Sonia and I. So yes, as Jess said, Sonia and I are going to be talking a little bit about school refusal from a couple of different perspectives, really. As we said, we really want this to be an opportunity for you to pop questions and comments in the chat that we hope to address as we go through. So yes, I'm Lisa and I work at the University of Melbourne, and I'm a teacher first and foremost. Might be working as an academic at the minute, but I am a teacher. That's how I kind of really identify myself in my role. And I've been working in a range of different settings throughout my career, but I have a particular passion for working with young people who have been marginalised from schooling, young people with disability, and also with school refusal. My last school placement was at Travancore School, where Sonia is, so we are colleagues of many years standing. Mm-hmm. And I'm very excited to be able to work with Sonia today to do this presentation.
Thanks, Lisa. My name's Sonia. I'm a teacher at Travancore School, as Jess and Lisa mentioned. I've had a few different roles in the school, but the role that I'm in most recently is our inter-school program, which is a school refusal program for young people who have been out of school for a long time. And we run that program in partnership with the University of Melbourne and with the Royal Children's Hospital Mental Health Service. So it's very much a collaborative approach to supporting young people get back into schooling from that mental health perspective, school perspective, families, and with the research behind it too.
Fabulous. So we'll get started and get into our session. So I guess the first thing we want to do is talk about the types of school attendance problems that exist in the research or the literature at the moment. The reason that we want to do that is because we are focusing just on school refusal today. Now, we absolutely acknowledge that there can be crossover between different types of school attendance problems. But I think because the work Sonia and I do is so focused on young people school refusing, that's the area that we would like to talk about today with the time that we have. So I'm just going to quickly go through what truancy, school withdrawal and school exclusion are. And then I'll talk about school refusal in a little more detail.
Thanks.
So truancy is a typology of school refusal a typology of school attendance problems, that's what SAPs mean, where the young person, in an oversimplified discussion or definition, doesn't want to go to school. So the young person can often find other things that they can do outside of school time. They might be socialising with others. They might be doing a lot of gaming. There can be a lot of things that they might be doing. And generally, the truancy typology is linked to the parents have sometimes not an awareness of what's going on with their young person or the fact that the young person's not at school until they start getting contacts from the school asking where their child is. School withdrawal is a typology of school attendance problem where the young person is generally home with the knowledge of their parent, but they're generally home because they're needing to support in some way their family. So it might be that the young person needs to work. It might be the young person is a carer for their someone in the family, whether it's a sibling or a parent or a carer. And they are not at school for those reasons. School exclusion is more a school motivated typology of school attendance problem, where the young person is not at school due to being excluded due to perhaps complex behaviours of concern, perhaps disability that their school is finding difficult to manage, or something else that might be happening where the student may have been subject to disciplinary procedures or asked perhaps not to be at school, and that's a whole another kettle of fish, which we can talk about another time. So let's talk about what school refusal is. So school refusal is, I guess, oversimplifying it, is when a young person can't go to school. So they're really reluctant or actually refuse to attend school, and very often there's emotional distress linked to that. So we often find that the school refusal typology is linked to mental health needs, very often anxiety and mood disorders. They're the types of disorders that come up most often with this population of young people. The young person doesn't try to hide their absence from their parents. You'll often find their parents have done everything they can to try and get them to be at school. But unfortunately, it's beyond what the family can achieve at that point in time. I also want to say, when Sonia and I use the word parents, we do acknowledge there are other types of care environments for young people. It might be that they're with guardians, they're in kinship care. So while we're saying parents, do understand we are talking about the full range of care options for students. The young person generally doesn't display antisocial behaviours, which you would sometimes find with the truant typology. However, that's not to say that if young people are feeling like they are being made to go to school, they can act out of it. And that's not unusual to see with this group. And the parents have, as I said, tried really, really hard to ensure that their child is at school, but it's just been too difficult. I guess when we're thinking about school attendance problems and how they become that, there's kind of this spectrum of school attendance problems. And it starts from they're attending school fine. We start seeing early warning signs of school attendance problems. Now, this might be a student who is articulating to a family member that they actually don't want to go to school. It could be that they are sick in the morning, so they might have stomach aches, or say they're feeling sick or have headaches, which means that, you know, they want to stay home because they're unwell. It could be that they're actually at school, but they want to spend time in the sick bay or with someone else in the school and not in class. They might be asking or requesting to go home early from different types of, from the school environment. They might be asking to call home. So there's lots of different early warning signs. We get to the point where there's real distress upon wanting to attend school and requests, really strong requests to not attend. Sometimes those morning misbehaviours start to happen that, you know, the parents just get to the point where it's just like, this is just too hard. It's just too hard. And the young person is able to stay home. They might just be repeatedly late. So the family does get them in the car or gets them on the bus or on the train or the tram or what have you. And they're late. So by the time they get going and get to school, they're actually late. They might start missing certain classes. That might be something that's happening for part of the school day or, you know, for the whole day. We often find that performance-based subjects are ones that students prefer to miss, like you know, phys ed, they've got to do an oral presentation, there might be an assessment, there's a sport day, those sort of things. And then we get to the point where there ends up being lots of absence and then extended absence. Once we get to sort of the point of, you know, periodic missing towards full absence, the ability to get a young person back to school without really complex and intensive intervention becomes difficult. It does become difficult, and we need to really work as a community to make that happen. So you can see we put a question at the bottom, so I'll stop talking, to say, you know, if you've got experience of a child or client who's not wanting to attend school, what have you seen? So, you know, share some of the things that you've experienced and, you know, where might it fit on this continuum? So we'll check into the chat for a moment and give you a chance to respond to that before we move on. Sonia, was there anything you wanted to add at this point?
No, just be lovely if people could add something into the chat to identify kind of some things that they've seen or noticed. There have been, just I want to acknowledge, there have been a few chat things about background noise. So I just want to double check that people are muted. But I think, Lisa, it might be your kitchen that's the background noise. So
yes, I think there's some stuff happening in my kitchen, yes, which you might be able to hear. So I'll just go on mute while we're doing this bit.
So just bear with us with the background noise, but thank you to everyone for having your microphones turned off.
Yeah, so we're getting a few comments in the chat. So talking about periodic skip classes, missing part of the day, or full absence. A lot of people talking about being in the orange zone, only a few days a week. Some people in the green zone. Lots of distress as well. And yeah, there's some presentation as well that been struggling to go for school for years, but the last week's is now refusing to leave his room. So it's quite an escalation there for some people. Fatigue is being mentioned. Parents' mental health issues too, and that can be quite a common thing we see with school refusal. I know myself in my experience, and I'm not an expert by all means on this, but that's something I've definitely seen a lot about. An interesting one here, someone saying that the kids are going to school now, but they're not engaging in class. So they're physically getting there. Conversations about the escalation starts with the small things like being late, missing a bit of the day, and then that builds days and weeks. Conversation around anxiety and the struggle with online learning as well. Yeah, very stressful time for families.
Thank you everyone for putting those things into the chat. I've been able to have, obviously not read all of them in detail, but just I can see the theme coming through from that is that there are a lot of young people who are struggling with school attendance at the moment. And that does result and cause a lot of frustration, stress, and can be really, really difficult to manage, especially on your own. And I mentioned earlier that the program I'm in is, you know, a wraparound model, a real collaborative model. And I just want to acknowledge that it's really tough on your own. So one of the things that we'll be talking about a lot today is about working together and creating a team. So some key factors that promote increased school attendance. So I know we've sort of talked about what school refusal is, and I know a lot of people have identified some of the, you know, the current concerns you have and the stresses that go along with that. What we've really focused on today is some practical steps to promote school attendance and increasing school attendance. But I absolutely want to acknowledge that that's not an easy task, and it's not something that happens quickly. So it is a journey process. So just a few key things that are really important to think about. And it might be helpful to think about your current situation or a young person that you know, and to think about whether some of these things might be key factors that you might take on as a next step to support your young person, whether that's as a school staff, as a parent, as a carer, as a worker. So it's really important that each response is individualised specifically and to the young person, really tailored to their needs. There isn't sort of a one size fits all, you know, that's going to result in increased school attendance. There are certainly strategies that we might talk about today that will suit, you know, a group of young people, but it really is important that it's individualised. Positive partnerships between the home and school are really important. I think that creates a space for communication, for regular communication and understanding about what the situation is, what the concerns are, what the anxiety is, what strategies might need to be implemented. If there's a really strong relationship there, that really facilitates a lot of the work that comes next. It's really important that the young person's involved in the process and thinking about what using their voice to determine the response. It's really hard to drive any plans of school attendance without the young person being a part of that plan and making those decisions with the team along the way. I already talked about a little bit about the contact between home and school. So attending school daily can be a really tough thing. And if there's a monthly meeting or a termly meeting, sometimes the nuances of what needs to happen on a particular day can get lost. So that regular contact is really important because we know how stressful it is on a daily basis. It's important for the team to work together on shared goals and have those sort of agreed goals from the beginning so that you're all working, you know that you're working together towards the same thing and on the same page. A detailed plan with small achievable steps. I think that's really important to acknowledge that, of course, we want the goal for all our young people to be at school full time, but that's a really big end of journey type goal. And it's really important to break it down into smaller steps. And that there's a shared understanding between the school, the family, and workers what school refusal is, which is so great that people are participating in this today, because I think that really contributes to an understanding that this really is tough for the young person. It doesn't come from a lack of interest in school. It doesn't come from laziness or being slack or getting in trouble at school. School refusal comes from, you know, distress or anxiety about school. Lisa, did you want to add anything?
Oh, I just think that, you know, it's very important, as Sonia mentioned, that the group, the team around the student is working together And so that's why this shared understanding of what school refusal is so important, because we do know that there can be families who feel frustrated when responses that they're getting are about parent blame or parent judgment. And, you know, parents are very open about, you know, the feelings that they get when people think that they're not doing enough, when they've pretty much done as much as they could possibly do. And they just really need a lot of support. So that's why it's really important that the professionals in particular, you know, do some training or do some learning and understanding about what school refusal is, and an understanding of how complex it is. I think another thing to, you know, link to that small achievable plan is that we know it's the research is really clear that trying to increase school attendance in the first instance is actually not the best step. What we're trying to do, if there is current school attendance, is to at least maintain that and have enough supports in place that the young person can be maintained at school, and that the family can get the systems and processes in place to really support that maintained attendance, that the school can get systems in place to support that before we start thinking about increasing attendance.
Can I just jump in there, guys? I've got a couple of questions in the chat that are probably quite relevant for you to answer now. So one of them is, what if the school isn't willing or interested to provide that support? So obviously they're meant to, but have you got any tips on how to handle that situation?
I think that, you know, they're often difficult conversations, and schools are, you know, schools really are pushed to the limits at times, and providing resources can be difficult. I think sometimes finding that one person in the leadership or the wellbeing team that perhaps you can build a connection to and see whether or not they can give you some time support, or even some onward referral as a first point. If you've got outside agencies involved, very often they can work in an advocacy role to help build that school connection and that school support. So there are a couple of ideas I have. Sonia, what do you think?
Oh, yeah, I think I agree. I think trying to make a connection with a person at school and talk to the school leadership and or the wellbeing team about your concerns, that can be a good starting point. It depends. I think it's so varied depending on the school and the circumstances of the school. In terms of who the best person to go to is. But if you have been sort of liaising with a teacher or someone like that, perhaps find someone in the school. I do want to acknowledge that I think schools are increasing their understanding as we are all here together today talking about school refusal. So it definitely is an increasingly becoming an issue or concern for schools. And I think a lot of schools are getting a lot more information about school refusal and how to support young people with school refusal. So for some schools, they might be at the beginning of that journey.
I just thank you to Melanie Mitchell, who's a mental health practitioner, but she just pointed out as well that by the end of this year, all schools should have the NHP worker. So if you don't know whether your school has that or if they're about to get it, it's worth asking questions. So there are specialist workers in all the schools that can actually be a key point of contact for you guys in this situation.
So that's the mental health practitioners in schools.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right. So one of the things that one of the groups that we belong to is an international network of school attendants, and recently we had some of our parents present about school refusal, and they came up with these 6 things that they felt they really need from the people they work with, so schools and agencies, to try and work in the space of school refusal and other school attendance problems. And I'm quite sure as a teacher, well, I know as a teacher that these are things that I want to build as well. So they're not foreign by any means to any of us who work together in this space. So parents are talking about needing that sense of compassion. So, and hearing that from the people they work with, that we know this happens, we understand. If a trauma-aware school culture can be very important. The understanding that, you've got to build trust, that the child's best interest needs to be at the heart of everything, or the centre of everything. And that's something I think Sonia and I are very keen about and very much focused on in the program, that we have is the student at the centre and the student voice helping actually guide and lead the interventions and what we do. Relationships are so important, and that's, you know, real investment and effort and listening and equal partnerships, that sense of collaboration, and we'll talk a bit more about that as we go on. That there needs to be flexibility and patience. There needs to be reasonable adjustments. One of the things that we sometimes forget is that students who are school refusing, who may have mental health disorders and other disabilities, are protected under the Disability Discrimination Act and the Disability Standards for Education. So they are required to have reasonable adjustments to support their engagement with school. So we need to think about what can those look like, and sometimes you've got to be pretty creative in the ways that you approach what those reasonable adjustments look like. Parents want a reprioritisation. They want the education put on hold, and we hear that a lot with the young people we work with. But the focus at the minute is to get back to school. We know that young people are often falling behind in education. We understand that, but teachers work with a diverse range of learners in their classrooms at any point in time. And so, you know, it's about getting them back, and then we work on the skills they need in order to improve their academic learning. They also have to rebuild a stamina for learning when they go back. Our students have been out of school for, you know, long periods of time, and just the ability to concentrate for 5 or 10 minutes is really hard. So having an understanding of those reprioritising, I guess, concepts or ideas, and allowing people to really have a voice in the change process. So that was some of the things that came from the parents that we work with in an international group, what they feel they need. But as I said, I think all of us who work in this space want that from one another. We really want to, I guess, emphasise the importance of a wraparound model of care. The research, and this is one of those things that, you know, I kind of don't like to say, but I want to say, is that the research is fairly solid that once you get to more than 10% of missing school, you need a wraparound model of care. You need a team in order to get the young person back, particularly if the absence has been going for quite a long time. So thinking about wraparound as a model of care, which is a really defined process to build these constructive relationships and support networks around the family and the young person and the school and any other agencies involved, looks at how we can provide work that's community-based, that is culturally relevant, strength-based, individualised, and very much family-centred. It's about more than just school. When we're working with young people with school refusal, yes, school is central, but there are often other things going on as well that need to be considered. And so you do need a team of experts to address these different life domains for the young person. And we really we use wraparound where there is a level of risk. And in this case, it's a level of risk, a high level of risk that the young person may not continue with their schooling. So this is why wraparound works really well for that. The team can be anybody, but these are just some examples. You have schools, you might have family workers, community clinicians, youth services, GP. Sometimes we even need to involve the extended family if there is members of extended family who can help with things like school drop-off, school pickup, and other supports. So I guess as we go forward talking, we're thinking about wraparound. We're thinking about all the people who can work together to support the young person.
Thanks, Lee. So I've noticed that some of the things that are coming up in the chat are, you know, people responding to each other with providing resources or ideas, and that's really lovely to see that we've very quickly created a community of people, you know, that you can share and support each other. So that's really lovely. I think you've gone too far ahead, Lisa.
Have I? Yes.
No, one that says key skills. No, yeah, the other way. Just getting a preview.
I'm clicking backwards and it's not going backwards. Hold on, let me give it. I love technology, everybody.
This one, yep.
And it's not my forte, and I'm going to put that right out there for everybody to know. And you'll see examples of that now.
Thank you very much for everyone for being very forgiving with us and the technology. There, as you would have seen in the preview of slides, we will talk about again, being quite practical with talking about promoting attendance and what things help promote the attendance. So each thing on their own is not necessarily the single answer, and there won't be a single answer. But these are things that we've found combined together are very common, I think, strategies or tools or ways of going about things that help promote that school attendance. So it is a combination of things. We will talk about schools, and we will talk about things in the home and how professionals can support that. That will come later on. But I did want to start with thinking about the young people and key skills and strategies to foster in young people. So there are some things, I guess, that I've noticed in my work with young people, that sorts of skills that help them with their return to school. And it'd be maybe a nice opportunity for you to think about your young person or your child, and think about how you can support with this. It's not suggesting that this is something that parents do on their own or that schools do on their own. So I think for us, the question is constantly who can help with this, because it is a team approach. So emotional literacy and emotional regulation, I think that's a really key first step for a lot of young people. So having that self-awareness of their own emotions, what their comfortable and uncomfortable feelings are, how that feels in their body. We know that a lot of young people who are school refusing are very anxious, and we've seen that a lot with the chat stuff that came up, people sharing anxiety and being distressed, particularly in the mornings. A first sign to sort of any first sort of step to any emotional regulation is that literacy and understanding of the self. And a rating scale out of 10 can be a really quick and easy way to introduce talking about and noticing anxiety. It's really important that it's modelled to young people, and that an adult around them might even say something like, "Oh, I notice you're pacing a bit, or you're scrunching your fists. What's your anxiety out of 10 like at the moment?" It's a really nice way to let the young person know that you're noticing their stress and you're validating that they feel that way, rather than ignoring their anxiety and pushing them anyway. We want to acknowledge it. And it's also really important, I think, here to talk about that we want to acknowledge that young people are anxious and experience a lot of anxiety or nervousness or worries as they return to school. We actually want to help them have the skills to manage that anxiety. So it's not about that anxiety being gone completely or it disappearing. That's often unrealistic, but teaching young people to manage it so the level of anxiety reduces, and the scale out of 10 can be a helpful tool to do that, to sort of keep track of how anxiety is going. Thanks, Lisa. So I guess once a young person has a bit more of a grasp of what's going on for them in their body, particularly around anxiety, then there are some, I guess, positive coping strategies to think about too. So increasing that resilience to keep trying again, even when it's been tough. The second one I think I've talked a little bit about. So managing that discomfort and increasing the distress tolerance. So being able to notice it and sit with it rather than hoping it will disappear, because we know as adults, our anxiety does come back, and we find strategies to manage that anxiety. And sometimes it can be a helpful emotion to have as well, to help us prepare for something that's coming next. Thinking about calming strategies or relaxation things, trying out mindfulness techniques. Visualizations can be a helpful tool to help young people practice going to school or thinking about themselves in school, and kind of thinking of their future self and rehearsing that scenario can also help to reduce that anxiety. So self-talk. So practicing self-talk and mantras, things like, "I will be okay, it's going to be okay, this is hard for me, but I'm going to do it anyway." They can be helpful things, particularly if you know that mornings especially are tough. They might be things that you practice the night before and you have them up on the fridge or on the back of the bedroom door or something, and use them over and over. And of course, asking for help from the adults that they can ask for help from. I'll just pause there for a moment before I keep reading. Not to go back, but just want to acknowledge too that this is not something that is done in isolation at home or for young people to need to do. It's about the teams identifying what does this young person need, what skills can we help them with, and then working as a team to identify who that would be. So practicing things at home, but there might be school-based support workers in wellbeing or school counsellors, speech therapists who can practice these skills with young people, help them build these skills so that they can transfer them to the school environment. So other things that they might want to work on, social skills, because we know those peer relationships get trickier and trickier as school goes on, and it changes quite a lot as young people move into the secondary school. So building those skills, building young people's independence, and also their self-belief that they can take on responsibilities and they can manage increased demands. Often we find young people feel really disempowered and discouraged because they found school really tough, and they need our help to build them back up again so that they believe that they can do it too. And I know on a practical level, sometimes organisational things, so schedules, making sure they've got equipment, how they manage their time. Particularly, I think, as young people go into secondary school, a lot of the organisational part of secondary school falls a lot more on the young person, and sometimes that can be really tricky, especially in the beginning. And coming from a primary school setting, that can sometimes be a really big change or shift, where a primary school teacher may have managed a lot of those tasks and broken things down and provided some of that scaffolding around that.
I think too, when we're talking about those organisational skills and that point of transition, as you mentioned, Sonia, is it's really important for skills or strategies that have been working in primary school to be transitioned and turned into secondary type strategies and passed on. And what we often find too with the students who fall into this group is that while we know that particularly in year 7, secondary schools are great at setting up those structures and organisations and plans, for the students who are at risk of school non-attendance, these things need to be continued so we don't fade them out, you know, in the first few weeks or the first term. These students need continual support around their organisation, their equipment, their time management, work completion and submission, because you just need 1 or 2 little things to go wrong, and that can, you know, increase the non-attendance for those students.
Thanks, Lisa. So this slide is about how schools can promote school attendance, and I guess some key factors for schools to consider, and for you to think about how your young person manages in a school space and how some of these things could be incorporated into their plan. So I'm aware that most of the audience today are family and people supporting families, but these are, I guess, are some key things that we know promote school attendance overall. So a strong sense of connectedness to school, and having those regular connections. We know a lot of the young people in the inter-school program that I work with, those connections have been lost. They've broken down. Maybe a lot of time has been spent outside of school. Maybe there were some issues, peer relational issues at school beforehand. Maybe young people feeling like teachers didn't understand them. And sometimes parents too, you might have felt like schools didn't understand the situation either. So that connectedness is really important for schools to think about and how they manage that with young people. Feelings of success is another really important key factor, because again, the inter-school students I've worked with often feel like they've failed at school. They've failed sometimes as a young person in the home because they're not doing their role of being a student, and they can often feel the stress that puts on people at home as well. And sometimes they may have had, difficulties in the classroom with learning tasks or making friendships. And so creating any opportunity for that young person to feel success and have a positive experience of school and in the learning space is really important. So that being really familiar with school and having that sense of belonging is really important too, particularly for young people who have been out of school for a long time, sometimes not even being familiar with the school environment. And that can be a really big first hurdle too. A lot of our young people start their return to school with a tour of school. So just meeting one key person, one key adult at school, maybe it's the wellbeing person or the year level coordinator, and having a walk around. Sometimes we very quickly go into, what are all the things we want to see the young person do in the classroom. And sometimes they just need to be familiar and comfortable in the environment first. Student voice. This is one that Lisa talked about a bit earlier and the one that I'm really passionate about. It's so important for us to understand what the young person's experience of school is as a teacher, and know what their history has been at school, what they like, what they don't like, what's tough. Is it easy or hard for them to ask for help? Do they like working in groups? Is that really stressful for them? What subjects do they enjoy? What's happening with them and their friendships? Do they feel safe at school? Is there someone that they trust at school or that they feel cares about them? What do they want to do with their future schooling? As a school, it's really important for us to understand the young person's experience of school, what's happened, for any progress to happen in terms of moving forward. It's important for schools to be responsive. So paying attention to the concerns that are raised by family or young people or other advocates, and address and communicate those concerns with the people involved in hopefully the support team, and focus on strengths. So start with what the young person is good at, start with what's working well for the young person, and that ties in a little bit too to that feelings of success. So really focusing on what's already working well and start from there, rather than starting from, I guess, what the deficits are or the gaps are or what's not happening, because that can feel quite discouraging if there's not a lot of success happening at school.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we're doing with the interschool program is we're collecting a lot of student voice data from our young people, and we're hearing the same sort of stories again and again about what they need from schools, that all the things Sonia said, the safe and supportive environment, someone who listens, take away the focus on schoolwork, just allow us to learn how to exist in the space, how to help, having strategies, teachers understanding the mental health needs as well, and supporting the student to enact their strategies and coping skills for their mental health at school. So we're really looking forward to being able to share more of that data as at another time, not now, to really, get some strong student voice information to help guide things.
Thanks, Lisa. So in terms of things that you can do at home, and I guess some of the other things are for the professionals or the schools working with young people to think about too. And these are certainly important things to get help with, and to bring and draw on the support where you can. So whether that's from school or whether it's from someone in your extended family or a family service that can support you. But these are some key things that we've noticed and seen in our young people, that when these things, this combination of things happen at home, they're more likely to attend school. So it's about promoting their attendance. It's really, I guess, common that when young people aren't attending school, it can be really hard to maintain the expectation that they do attend school, and hard to maintain the routine of them attending school. Because some of that gets lost because they're not going to school, and it's hard to kind of use the school structure of the day for the routine. But it's so important to maintain that, and maintain that expectation. So it's okay for there to be tough days where school hasn't happened, but for you as a family to still have an expectation that your young person attends school. So that attend might be, a part-time timetable or that attend might be going into the school grounds to check in with someone. And they may not even be up to that level. They might be a few steps before, but just that preparedness to try something towards school, make a step towards being at school every day helps. I give that message that attending school is an expectation from you as a family. Modeling that positive regard and positive attitude towards school is important. So I know as adults, we've all had different experiences of what school's been like. And it's for a young person that's struggling with school, it's really important to try and maintain your positive regard and attitude towards school as well. Because it's really hard for a young person to feel positive about school if the people around them aren't feeling positive about school. And it can be really easy to, communicate, challenges or talk about stuff that's frustrating you about school. But that doesn't help the young person feel positive about school. So just thinking about what and how you communicate with the young person about school. Doesn't mean you won't be frustrated about school. Or that doesn't mean you're not, there aren't concerns that you have, but it's important to think about how you communicate those. Removing devices during the school day or other enjoyable activities is really important as well. And it's really just about communicating your expectation that they're at school. And if they're not at school, creating that environment at home that is not, giving any secondary gains to staying at home. So we don't want to make home a nicer place to be than school. And then follow up with any physical symptoms or non-attendance with visits to the GP. So if we know it's really common for young people to talk about physical symptoms or feeling sick or having tummy aches. And it's really helpful to let young people know that if those things are happening, then a visit to the GP is really important. And that might help distinguish between what are symptoms or is a symptom or an illness that your young person has experienced physically and what might be the result of anxiety. And similar to that, the roles and responsibilities. So really keeping that expectation that the role of the child in the family is about being a student. And as parents and caregivers, you have a role in the family too. And students, young people also have a role to be a student. So maintaining those expectations about those roles in the family are important, even when attending school's been really tough. Thanks, Lisa. So some of these things I've touched on before. So they're really just things for you to have a think about whether they're the next step for you. So I'm not suggesting all of these happen or change overnight all at the same time, but they're really things for you to think about, is this a factor that might be contributing, or is this a factor that I could change to promote their attendance? So routines and healthy habits. Sleep in particular is often a very big one, particularly when the routine or the structure of the school day is gone. That can often disrupt the sleep-wake cycle. So having a think about whether the sleep-wake cycle or sleep routine that your young person currently does that promote them going to school the next day? If they go to bed really late and wake up late and tired, it's not promoting their ability to be at school that day or the expectation you have for them to be at school that day. So getting a bit of a sense or a handle on what the device use is, screen time. We know that's, a challenge for a lot of our young people about being on devices, and may not have been helped by the pandemic and the restrictions and being at home. And we are all on our devices a lot for all sorts of reasons now. So having just a think about what's happening with their screen use. We know that a lot of young people we work with do spend a lot of time on screen. And in terms of getting up in the morning, some young people will struggle to get out of bed because they're already worried about, the fact that they have to go to school and you're going to talk about school. They're going to have to get dressed to go to school. Something at school might be happening that they're worried about. So try and start the morning off in that positive way and plan for something that's maybe enjoyable first thing in the morning, or a really yummy breakfast. Maybe some yummy crumpets that smell really good or something might entice them out. Incentives and consequences. So that's really about when your young person does go to school, think about how to reward and acknowledge that. So if there's been a full week of attendance at school, you know, celebrating that. We know that it's hard for them to get to school, and find opportunities to celebrate the successes they do have. I think that goes a long way for them to know that people know it's hard for them. And when they do it, it's really nice for that to be acknowledged for them. And that starts to help build their success or their feelings of success. And of course, following through with any consequences of non-attendance, like not having devices available in school hours. Think about whether there's any barriers to being at school. I know when a lot of young people have been out of school for a long time, sometimes their uniforms don't fit anymore. Sometimes they don't have the right books. Maybe transport to school is really tricky. So just thinking about those really practical things. If they don't have the uniform or the books, it's not promoting their attendance at school. So making sure that they've got what they need as a first step is really important. And making it visible. So all those things that you might be thinking about with routines and thinking about sleep, thinking about rewards, make everything visible. So if there's an attendance plan, display it, put it up. It really helps young people to prepare themselves for being at school, what to expect. And by making it visible, that's, I guess, one strategy of keeping that expectation. If it's up there, everyone can see it and you can talk about it together. You're setting that expectation, or you're sending that message that school is important. Thanks, Lisa. Did you want to add anything to those, Lisa, about home? You're muted.
Of course I am. No, I think you've covered them really well, and I'm conscious of time, so we might just keep moving, I think.
Beautiful. So this will be just a quick slide just to think for the professionals in the group to think about how they can support families and schools and young people. So just thinking about being able to identify school attendance concerns early, talking to the young people, families and schools about concerns that you have come up. So the earlier intervention can happen, or the earlier supports can be put in place, the better. Targeted supports, resources, guidance to schools, depending on what role you're in, whether it's supporting schools, family, or the young person directly. So thinking about what supports and resources each person in that team might need. If you're working with a young person directly, how can you foster those key skills and strategies? So whether that's at school or another service working with young people, referring them to relevant services. So I know Jess from Navigators joining us today to talk a bit about Navigator. So that's one example of a service that you might think about referring to. And for professionals to facilitate and participate in the wraparound model. So it's not just about schools and it's not just about families. It's about everyone who's working or concerned about that young person being involved in the plan.
I think one thing just with regards to identifying school attendance concerns early is that with the young people that are generally in our program, the early warning signs for school non-attendance often happened years before they got to us. So it really is about what sort of data is being kept at the school level about attendances. And sometimes it's really hard with the school systems that we have, Compass or any of the other systems, you know, for parents to nominate a different type of non-attendance than what's in the drop-down boxes, for schools to start looking for patterns of lates or late starts or early leaving, or, you know, in primary schools, you know, thinking about missed classes can be more difficult because unlike a secondary school, you're not sort of taking attendance every session generally. So I think it's about really looking at what those things are. And we also acknowledge that it can be really hard to access services. As I've been looking at the chat, I know people have been saying, you know, the wraparound, you know, sounds great, but how do we get the services involved? And I agree that the service system can be complex. And that's why, you know, your school can help with, you know, identifying different groups that can support you. But I'm really glad, as Sonia said, that Jess is here to talk about Navigator. Yeah.
I just noticed a question about, you know, our young people who have academic difficulties more likely. And I just thought it's really important to acknowledge that school refusal doesn't discriminate. So it happens for young people from all sorts of backgrounds, from all different academic abilities. It's really not sort of a particular young person that we can describe that experiences school refusal. It doesn't discriminate. So it's not about, low academic achievement or high academic achievement or family background or cultural background or any of those.
Yeah, we're still trying to really gather research on that. We know that it's not gendered. There's often equal boys and girls will often experience school refusal. We are seeing anecdotal and some early research that it's more prevalent in students who are autistic. So that's something that we need to be really aware of. So we're gathering a lot more information now that people are paying attention to this as a real concern and not just this thing that'll fix itself. So, the more that we can study, the more we can research, the better we'll get at really being able to set processes and programs up.
Thanks,
I guess we're just moving through because I know that we want Jess to speak and we want more time for questions. So we just want to know when you're planning for increased attendance, as much as you can, we want that team-based approach. We do want to know where the young person is, and if they're attending school, maintain. That's our first goal. Then start to build on it. We have to ask the young person what they want to achieve. Most of the young people who are school refusing, there is a motivation to get back to school. It just seems too hard. So how can we help take those stepwise approaches to meet that long-term goal? Graded exposure is something that mental health workers can do very, very well, making those small manageable steps that Sonia was talking about earlier. We talked about minimising academic expectations, very, very important. And I know there are questions around, well, the other kids will see them, sometimes you hear the words getting away with not having to do the work. It's not about that. School and life is about getting what you need. These young people to attend need specific things at this point in time. Other students in the group and the class will need different things at different times. So it's really about looking at that individualised process. Definitely need plan A's and B's. And all efforts to attend, we really need to encourage and we really need to celebrate, though not necessarily in a, yeah, you got to school today way, because some students do not want that at all when they get there. They don't want it commented on. They don't want people to make a fuss. They just want to slip in and be there. Did you want anything, Sonia?
No, that's perfect. Thanks, Lisa.
I guess just when we're thinking about working in a wraparound model, if you are working in that space, one of the things we've found that there can be some barriers that can impact the success of a wraparound model. So we just want to make sure, and I know workers think about this all the time, but we want to make sure that roles and responsibilities are very clear. Who's doing what? Whose role is it to organise meetings? Whose role is it to share communication? If you've got case management, that's great because, that person will do the work, but that doesn't always happen. There needs to be really clear communication channels between the family, school, and student and any other agencies involved. And people need to be kept in the loop. It's too easy for things to go awry with return to school plans when people miss out on specific steps or didn't get that particular phone call or email. So it's really important that you work out what a communication plan might look like. It's difficult when different agencies work together. So like when a school's working with, say, we've got the problem with Travancore and RCH working together, they have totally different record management systems. So, how can we ensure that there's shared records that people can use in order to make the best decisions when you can't actually get into one another's systems? So what sort of processes are set up that allow workers to do that? And, what resources for support are there? Can you support a family to get funding to help with transport? Can you help a family get funding to help with, uniforms, books, etc.? So who knows that information, who holds it, and how can that be distributed? And I guess we just wanted to add from from our staff, some of the staff, when they think about what works well with a wraparound, and hopefully this is encouraging for people. you know, that integrated way of working is about schools and families being safe, feeling safer in the process and supported in the process. You know, when their programs are being delivered together, there's more strength. We know that it optimizes recovery when there's that collaboration between health and education. And, you know, there's a lot of support felt by everyone. That working as a team also brings different perspectives. So things might work for one person and not for another, but if you've got different people involved, you can come up with solutions very often. And, you know, trusting one another as workers and professionals, it's a really important part of the process. Sonia.
I guess lastly, we just wanted to acknowledge to look after yourself as well, and just knowing that burnout happens, and we really want to prevent that. And if it's happening or happened already, thinking about how you can look after yourself. So self-care is really important, I think, particularly for parents and people living with a young person in the household, but of course also for professionals involved, or schools. Burnout happens for professionals as well. So just being very aware of what triggers you and what your responses are. Ask for help, whether that's from services or family or friends. Please reach out to the people that you need to reach out to, and that can help you, even if it is just an ear to listen to you. Plan your self-care activities. So think about, you know, what helps you, and plan for those things to happen, and reach out to professional and other services too. So in particular, I guess this would be a good time for us to know a bit more about Navigator. I know that there's been a few things in the chat about what is Navigator. So Jess, this is probably a good opportunity for you.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that Jess is with us in the crowd at the moment somewhere. Yes. So we welcome Jess. So Jess is one of the workers at Navigator, but I'll let her explain a bit more about the program and referral pathways and everything as well.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. And I just want to acknowledge that I suppose everyone's here because they have a young person or child who are experiencing what we're talking about, having difficulties with school, or we work with young people who are having difficulties with school. And I also want to acknowledge firstly that we are in a really, we're coming out of a really difficult time, and COVID has compounded a lot of school refusal for young people. And that also, it's a difficult service system and a difficult system to manage and follow and engage with. So I'm kind of doing this in acknowledgement that that is also what we're kind of working within too, and everyone as parents as well. So I'll just talk a bit about Jesuits Social Services, which is the organisation that I work for. So we're a social change organisation, and we support the most in need in order to build a just society where all people can live to their full potential. We have 5 key service portfolios, and that's the Men's Project, Justice and Crime Prevention, which includes a whole bunch of community programs. We have mental health and wellbeing, and education, training and employment. So that's where Navigator sits under. And we've been delivering the Navigator program since 2016. And it was initially a pilot program in the Hume Moreland area. So we have also been delivering the program in the Bringbank Melton area as well. And we just started in the Northeast metropolitan area at the beginning of this year. So I'm aware that the concentration might be on the Northeast metropolitan area just because of who's facilitating this, Banyule Community Health. And we have a very large catchment area, and it's from Richmond up till Nillumbik. So City of Yarra, City of Banyule, City of Whittlesea,
Darebin, Nillumbik.
Darebin, sorry.
Yeah.
And so we encompass that whole area. So just to start off with, we support young people from the ages of 12 to 17 who are disengaged from education and who are attending less than 30% of the time for the previous term or year. Now, the eligibility criteria for our program is, of course, 12 to 17, attending less than 30%, but either live or have most recently been enrolled in an education setting in the Navigator area. So I can see there's a comment about Whitehorse. I'm going to take you through and share my screen to the referral page. And I'm not 100% sure about Whitehorse, but I'll show you all the areas that it's involved with. So a part of our program, a huge part of our program, is working very closely with family schools and key service providers to support a young person to re-engage in education. And in our NEMA region, we have two forms of support. So we have a waitlist, which is an active hold support, and the waitlist worker provides phone support to families while the young person is waiting for case management. And this may involve supporting families to make referrals to other supports where needed to help with access to other identified educational pathways, and communicating with schools and kind of getting everyone on a shared understanding and understanding what's happening for the young person. And then there's case management support, which is where case managers like me support young people and family members for 9 to 12 months. So in our region, we also have a partnership with VACA, and there's a VACA case manager who sits within the team and provides support to young people who are from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds. I want to firstly talk about a few of the key learnings. So the age supports 12 to 17-year-olds, Louise. And that's a big gap because we know that issues with schooling generally start in primary. So, and I think that's been identified and is something that everyone is advocating for at a higher governmental level. So I'll talk a bit about the key learnings that we've had from our program. Addressing the core barriers is at the key of what we do, and going at a young person's pace. The importance of supporting young people and family members' mental health in order to successfully re-engage in education. Providing family support is integral and is key to successful school re-engagement. Navigator provides an important link and bridge between the students and families and schools. And building a trusting relationship is really at the heart of what we do. In a nutshell, we just want young people to feel like they have agency in their lives and they're hopeful about their futures. So we're a very holistic service, and being able to do this and work with young people and families for over a period of 9 to 12 months is really beneficial because it means we really do get to the core of what is happening and what are the barriers for young people and what they're facing. And that means we can build on their strengths and we can celebrate all the wins that they have, whether they be small or whether they be really big wins. And restoring relationships with young people within a young person's life is also key and really important, particularly as we've said that school is often like not a safe place for young people, and it's really hard. So I'm aware that some people didn't know about Navigator. Some of you do know about Navigator. Some of you might have made referrals to Navigator. But I was wanting to take you through the referral, what it looks like and how you would make a referral. So I'm wanting to be able to share my screen. I think I can just do that.
Yes, I think you should be able to, hopefully.
Yeah, okay, one sec. I've got a question. How many students does Navigator work with? It definitely depends. And because we work with young people for 9 to 12 months and we are an intensive service, we don't work with a huge caseload of young people per case manager. And I couldn't give you the number off the top of my head. Just students, actually, I'll take you through this first and then I'll answer the question. Sorry. Okay, share screen. Can you see that Navigator case management program?
Yeah, got it.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, if you just go to Google, and I haven't even spelt it right. No, I don't want to look at jobs. And just chuck in Navigator program to DET, Department of Education. And then if you click on the first link, you will come to the education, the DET website. And this is how you make a referral. Now, everyone can make a referral. School can make a referral, an outside organisation can make a referral, a parent can make a referral, and a young person can make a referral. So here we just have a little bit about it, just what I've spoken about. We just have the eligibility criteria, and this is where you make the online referral. So that will bring you to the Navigator referral form. Now, it goes through the eligibility criteria just to make sure that the young person is eligible. And then it will start to ask you kind of questions in regards to demographic information, who you are you the school or staff, are you the parent? And then that's not going to let me go forward, sorry. But it also goes into attendance criteria and bits about what are the barriers and what is the underlying factors for what's happening for that young person. Now, I know there was a question about the city of Whitehorse. Now, I'm not sure where Whitehorse, 17 and 1 month too old for Navigator. We work up until 18, so they can be referred. So these are basically, we go through all the areas here and we'll see if it's in your area. So we have Western Melbourne, and then these are the Department of Education contacts. So they're people who you might contact if you want to get a bit more information from the Department of Education. So they're the key contact for that area. Jess, yeah, Northern Territory. I'm really, yeah, that sucks. I'm really sorry. Hopefully Navigator is in every state at some point in time. Central Highlands.
Unfortunately, that's one of the issues with our system, isn't it, in Australia, that we do work under different states. So different state governments will have different programs. So that's one thing to look at with what your state government is providing, and different governments like to call them different things and package them differently. So it is best to do your own research on those things. Yeah, definitely. So Bayside Peninsula, you can see here, if that's where your area is within Victoria, that's how you go. Goulburn, it's in a lot of areas. Since it's started, it's rolled out very, very quickly. So are other states asking about the Navigator model? Are they interested in replicating? I'm not sure. I think they should be, personally. That's what I reckon. Yeah, it would be interesting. I need to do some research about that myself. And then that's us at the bottom, Eastern Melbourne. So if you're from the Northeast metropolitan area on this Zoom, then this is someone who you would contact to get more information. And where is Maya? Could you let me know what is the city of Whitehorse, isn't it? It's because they're broken up into areas. So I'm just trying to, what I'll do is I'll look into it more and then hopefully can give you some more information, Maya. Is there any, I'm going to ask some questions. Does anyone want Box Hill? Okay. Is there any questions? I'll look into it. Whitehorse is northeast.
I believe it's coming to the northeast. That was just released. Yeah. Not the northeast.
Yes, with the program currently, obviously there is going to be a waiting list. Do you know roughly what that looks like at the moment?
So the waiting list, as I said, it's frustrating, it's annoying, and I'm not going to say that it isn't, because it's just an issue with programs that are funded, and it's the issue with the service sector. And it's unknown. We don't have any length of time that it might be. And, you know, at the moment there is an influx of referrals, and I know that is not an adequate answer, and I'm
That's okay. I think it's just good for everyone to be on the same page. So obviously, maybe, you know, if you're out in the crowd tonight and you're thinking, like, oh, your child or a young person that you're working with, because we do have workers in the audience tonight, that maybe it's better to do a referral earlier than later and be on that list.
Always need to do a referral early and later. And what I want everyone to know is that the program is structured so the wait list is active. So you do get support on the wait list, whether that be being able to make and try and restore a relationship with school if that's needed, or to make a referral to another program that once the situation and the unique circumstances are understood, that we can possibly make referrals to other places that we know.
That's right. And I think hopefully what today has given everyone as well, guys, is that there's so much that goes into getting young people back to school. So there's so many little things that everyone can do. And I think, you know, with the chat today, there's obviously a lot of hopelessness. And I hope that something you can take away today is that you're not alone, for starters. Lisa shared with me before that there are some great online support groups for parents that we'll be sharing as well. And I think the chat has been really good, watching everyone actually talk to each other and give advice and support. And there was someone asking for more success stories. And I think, you know, if you're out there right now and you've got some more success stories, please put them in the chat, because I think we definitely need to hear some of those, because it's not hopeless. It is tough, and our structures can be painful. And I know that it's in a lot of industries as well, not just with school refusal. But I think it's good to break things down to really small portions. So there's a lot of great tips in those slides, talking about little things you can do at home, and start small. Start small, guys, and build them up. And it does take time, unfortunately. So, you know, even like for yourselves, for your own mental health and self-care, write things down, like where you're at, and then go back and look in a month's time, because you actually might see some change, and that can help spur you on to keep going. As a parent, I can't imagine what it would be like. So I understand how stressful that would be. So reach out to each other and look after each other too. I think that's probably it from the presentation side of things. So we will open it up to questions. So I know the chat's going nuts right now, so we might try and pull some out. I know that one of the things through a lot of the questions was talking about kids on the spectrum, so kids with ASD. So I'm not sure if anyone's got some specific conversation or tips and things in dealing with that, because some of those strategies might not work for a kid on the spectrum. So any advice or stories you might be able to share, Lisa, Sonia and Jess?
Sonia does a lot of work with young people with ASD, so she might be good to respond.
In terms of accessing supports, was that the question? Sorry.
I think there's some of your strategies around the wraparound service and things like that. There's a lot of people saying that might not work for some with ASD. So if you've got anything that you find has worked, and obviously all cases will be different, nothing fits all.
Yeah, I guess that does come back to that, one of the first points I made about every young person will have a different experience, and that it needs to be tailored. Every plan needs to be an individual response to that child. I do work with a lot of young people who have a diagnosis of autism, but again, the approach we have is very much an individualised one. So working with the strengths of that young person, and starting from a strengths-based approach rather than a deficit sort of model. I know there seems, there's lots of people who are feeling worried or disappointed in terms of feeling a bit, like there's a lot of stress. I can feel that coming through the chat, but it's really important. I think Jess, you mentioned about celebrating, writing a journal, acknowledging the wins that you do have. So we do ask parents heading to school to celebrate small wins, small things, take them as wins and celebrate those and build on the small things. So not just looking for the, the big picture, full-time attendance at school, but thinking about the small wins. And sometimes they're not even school attendance. Sometimes it's about the sleep routine. Sometimes it's about, increased communication at home. It's not always about, obviously the big picture is school attendance, but there's so many other little things and skills to focus on along the way. And we know it's not easy. If it was easy, you'd already be doing it. We know it's not.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So are there any other questions? I think one of the other things, and you guys might be able to have some advice on this, we do have some primary school families in the audience. So obviously Program Navigator aren't there for primary aged kids, is my understanding, Jess. So do you have any tips of or referral pathways for those in primary school?
I think with primary school, it'd be identifying what supports are. Is it a GP? Is it really, I think it's difficult to make individual suggestions because I think it just comes down to really what is the unique issue for that young person. And that's where you go to find support. Is it mental health support? And I know that what's coming up in the chat a lot is young people with ASD. And I think I'm going to Louise's comment, which I've really connected with, which I think is about finding the best learning outcome for a child. And that's going to be different for every young person. And that's dependent on, that's also primary school students. And needing to work with schools to become more inclusive. And that is hard to do when you're the main advocate for the young person, and it takes a lot of time and energy. So it's figuring out who can help you with that advocacy. And that might be GPs, that might be other social services. And it's about kind of putting the feelers out there, even through, I know it just sounds so obvious, like a Google search to see, asking your GP if they have contacts. It's really difficult because we know that we need these services in primary school, and it's us advocating as the service that we want this to be rolled out for younger people.
Thank you. Did Lisa, Jess, or Sonia, did you see any other questions in the chat that you would like to respond to?
I'm just looking through them now.
I think one that I just briefly responded to, but they're moving so fast. The first one I noticed is, celebrating success is just walking to the car in the morning, a success to celebrate. And I said, yes, with the graded exposure approach, every step that you meet is a success. So you might spend a week just walking to the car and walking back in. That's a success. The next time they might actually get in the car, or you might even get to the school gate and then go home. And that's, that all of those are successes. It's moving forward and in tiny little increments that meet the need of the young person.
Yeah.
Megan said student support services through the Department of Education may be a help with kids in primary, and I think that's really important to note.
Yes, I know a lot of people have shared links and things like that in the chat. So is it possible for those links to be sent out for you?
Definitely.
Send them out to parents. Wonderful.
Yeah, we did a bit of research through. Someone asked the clever question of can we save the chat, and we can. So I'll definitely be saving the chat, and I'll be adding that to the email with the recording at the end. And there was another question, guys, if you minded sharing your slides. So I'm not sure if you're able to do that or not.
You're muted.
Sorry, you're muted.
Yes, I'm happy to.
Yeah, I know. I'm worried my husband's going to start doing dishes again. So, I'm just muting in between. Let me just, find our slides. Hang on. Oops, go back to the beginning. Which slide did we want to find again?
So, or just the slides in general, if you could send them to me, I can.
Oh, the slides. Sorry, I thought you meant that. I thought you meant show a slide.
Just about having the slides available.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll send those through to you.
There was actually one more question that was a bit earlier in the conversation that grabbed me, and it was around contagion. And it was there was a couple of people that mentioned it. One linked with contagion within a family of school refusals, and also with friends. So is that something that you think can happen? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's definitely can be a huge part of young people, and it's the link to peers. And I think it comes back to the deeper issues that we were talking about. Is everyone wants to feel like they're a part of something, and everyone wants to feel safe and included, and that can be done with peers, and often that can be a big issue when young people are struggling with school.
Yeah, thank you. So I suppose, guys, if contagion is something that you're seeing, it's a good opportunity to jump in early with all these new skills and strategies that you've learnt today, and even reaching out to services too. So as everyone's spoken about, there's I'm from Banyule Youth Services. We have Nillumbik Youth Services here today as well. And I know in other regions they will have youth services teams at council and other not-for-profit groups as well that have lots of great programs and things that young people can get involved in that generally offer a really holistic service. So they might actually be going to a music program, but what they're getting with staffed youth workers is a lot of resilience and well-being around that. So sometimes it might even be trying to get them to a program like that is based on their interests, and that can help put them in a supportive environment with trained staff and other young people they feel comfortable with. That can then build onto school attendance and things like that. So thinking outside of the box for your young person can be a really good idea as well. Well, I think that's probably all we've got time for today. It's 5:30. I just want to thank everybody today. I don't think I've ever seen a chat so full with really excellent comments and really great sharing with each other. There's been some really good supportive conversation happening in there. So thank you guys for being so involved. I've had lots of people that had to leave early saying they absolutely loved it and desperately wanting the recording. So that's a really good sign. So thank you so much, Lisa, Sonia and Jess, for your words of wisdom and strategies and support. I think sadly it's a big area of need at the moment. So we really thank you for your time and expertise today. And guys, if anyone needs any more information or support, please reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat as well. I have flicked out the evaluation survey. I'll put it out again there now, guys. So if you could take a couple of minutes and fill that out for me, please share your ideas about today, but also what else you would like to see in these types of sessions, because we want to please everybody. Yeah, so thank you, everybody. I'll be sending out a copy of this recording hopefully tomorrow when it's all saved and safe. And I'll also include the slides from today, the chat conversation as well. And I've got some other resources and links that I'll include in that email too. So hopefully a jam-packed email with goodies for you that can keep you going. So thank you, guys. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
No worries.
Thank you.
Bye.